Are you dealing with a very serious debt problem and considering bankruptcy? In this video, I'm going to talk to you about Chapter 7 bankruptcy and walk you through it step by step as far as what you can expect. But if this is your first time here visiting my YouTube channel, go ahead and click subscribe. Each week I put out new videos that'll help you deal with serious debt problems. All right, let's talk about Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Now, when most people think about the bankruptcy process or going through bankruptcy, it's pretty much Chapter 7 that they're thinking of, or at least that's what they want to file. There are different chapters out there. There's Chapter 7 that we're going to talk about today. There's Chapter 9 that a lot of people haven't heard about. Chapter 9 is really designed for cities and towns that need to file for bankruptcy. There's Chapter 11, which you may have heard of. That's usually reserved for companies and corporations that need to file for bankruptcy. There's Chapter 12, which is a really obscure one. It's designed for farmers and commercial fishermen that tend to have a lot more debt than the typical person due to the types of loans that they have to take out to operate their farms. And then there's Chapter 13, which is a personal restructuring. So for most individuals, they're either looking at Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about what Chapter 13 is today. We're going to focus on the Chapter 7. But in my next video, we'll talk about 13 and why it is you may want to go that route. Okay, Chapter 7. The idea behind Chapter 7, it is super powerful and super great at a couple things. It's really great at getting rid of unsecured debts. Unsecured debts are typically things like medical bills, credit cards, personal loans, basically any type of debt that doesn't have any collateral or property attached to it. So when someone comes into my law office and they're looking to file Chapter 7 bankruptcy, the first thing we do is divide their debts into two groups. We have unsecured debts, again, credit cards, medical bills, personal loans, those types of things. And then we have their secured debts where there's property attached to it, like a home loan, car loan, boat loan, RV loan, anything that has property attached to it, we put that in another category. And the reason why we do that is because the court treats secured debts and unsecured debts quite differently in the Chapter 7 bankruptcy process. As I mentioned, unsecured credit cards, medical bills, personal loans, those typically are discharged, meaning they're eliminated and they go away completely in the Chapter 7 process. Secured debt, like home loans and car loans, are typically not discharged unless you decide you want to give up the asset. So in essence, if you want to keep your house, let's say you have a mortgage on your house and you're thinking, I want to keep my house as I'm going through this process, but I want to get rid of that credit card debt. You can keep your house typically as long as you continue to make the monthly payments on it. If you're not making your monthly payments on it, you're going to lose the house. There's no free house. There's no free cars in bankruptcy. I've had people come in thinking that they can do that they can file bankruptcy and that it would wipe out the debt on their house and that would wipe out the debt on their car and they would still be able to keep that. It's not true. If you want to keep the car, if you want to keep the house, you got to continue to make the payment. There's a couple other things that impact whether you can actually keep the car and keep the house, though, and that is the amount of equity that you have in your home or your car. Now, Chapter 7, again, big picture idea is it's going to get rid of all that unsecured debt. The trade-off, though, is the court's going to look to see, are there any assets that you have that can be liquidated or sold with the money then given to your creditors? Now, most people's assets and the property they have are protected under various exemption laws. Each state has exemptions, there's federal exemptions, and these exemptions protect your property as you're going through the bankruptcy process. But there's usually values or dollar limits attached to each of those exemptions. So, for instance, here in Arizona where I practice law, the homestead exemption protects up to $150,000 of equity in your home. So if you go into a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you can keep your house as long as you, one, keep making your monthly payments, and two, you don't have more than $150,000 of equity in your home. If you do have more than $150,000 of equity in your home, and again, this is the state of Arizona exemption. Each state's a little bit different. Some states are a lot different. Some states have very minimal homestead exemptions. There's other places that have unlimited homestead exemptions. But if you were in Arizona, for example, and you wanted to keep your house, you're making your payment, but you have more than $150,000 of equity, you would not want to file Chapter 7 because the court could take your home, sell it, pay off the first mortgage, give you $150,000 to cover your homestead exemption, and then anything above that, they would then distribute that to your creditors. So Most of the time, that's not a big problem. A lot of people don't have, like in Arizona, don't have more than $150,000 of equity in their home, but it is something definitely we look at is if you're at risk of losing anything. We see that more typically in cars, where a car is paid off completely and the value of it is more than the exemption for that state. If that was the case, then the court could sell the vehicle, give you your exemption amount out of the proceeds, and then give the rest to your creditors. So we would need to be able to look and make sure you're not going to lose anything if you're looking into Chapter 7. So let's go back to where I started with this. We have secured debts and unsecured debts. The unsecured debts are typically going to go away. The secured debts are not going to go away, and if you want to keep it, you got to continue to pay on it. Just have that be your general rule. If I want to keep my house, if I want to keep my car, I've got to continue to make the monthly payments on those. Now, it gets a little bit more complicated because then there's kind of subsets of each of these types of debts as well. With unsecured debts, there are certain unsecured debts that don't go away in bankruptcy, in Chapter 7 bankruptcy specifically that we're talking about here. There are certain debts like taxes that are given what's called priority status. There are certain debts like what are called domestic support obligations. These are things like alimony and child support. Those typically don't go away in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And most student loans do not go away in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So if you owe taxes, domestic support obligation like child support or alimony, or if you have student loan debt, you need to realize that by filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy, those debts are probably still going to be there when you come out on the backside. You're going to get rid of all the credit card debt, medical bills, and the other things that are giving you grief. But those other debts are probably still going to be there. There's certain exceptions to that, which we're not going to go into in this short YouTube video. But just in general, you need to be aware of that if you owe taxes, domestic support obligations, or student loans, those things probably aren't going to go away in your Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So the process itself is basically a ton of paperwork. Right now that I'm recording this in 2020, it's anywhere from a 70 to a 90-page document with information on you that's filed with the court. There's information about your income, about your assets, about your debts, about financial transactions that have occurred over the last few years. Basically, your whole financial world is going to be an open book when you file for Chapter 7. It's important, it's vitally important that you disclose everything and you be truthful in your documents. It is a crime if you don't do this. If you don't believe me, you just need to look at the latest real housewives of these various reality TV shows. I was thinking of the Miami Housewives or whatever those shows are called. That shows you how much I'm watching these things. But often it seems like these reality contestants get caught up on, they make a bunch of money, they buy a bunch of stuff, they get in debt, they file bankruptcy, and they don't disclose things. And these people end up going to prison over it. It is a felony to fail to disclose assets in your bankruptcy. Don't think you're going to get away with it. There have been millions of people that have gone through the bankruptcy process before you did. They know all the tricks. They know how to find the assets. You will not get away with it. Be truthful. You'll be able to get through it just fine. But particularly, you're working with an attorney, make sure you're disclosing everything. There's nothing more terrifying as a bankruptcy attorney than filing a case and then having a client come to me and say, by the way, I forgot to tell you about this. Make sure that you're very thorough in your disclosures and your case will generally go pretty smooth for you. So once all the information is put together, your case is then filed with the court. Now, one of the other very powerful things of a Chapter 7 bankruptcy is as soon as that case is filed with the bankruptcy court, the judge in the case will issue an order called the automatic stay. This stops all collections. No phone calls, no snotty letters, no lawsuits, no garnishments, no foreclosures, nothing. Everything stops as far as collections go. And it's called the automatic stay. It's literally automatic. As soon as I file these cases, we file them electronically, the court, an email essentially gets kicked out providing with that order that can then be sent out to your creditors. So if you're facing wage garnishment, foreclosure, just general collections, you're getting phone calls, All of that will stop as soon as you file your case and you get your creditors notified that they can no longer do those types of things. So once all of that is put together and it's filed with the court, there is one time you're going to have to go to the court. And right now, as I'm recording this in 2020, the world seems to be kind of falling apart with COVID-19 and everything else that's going on. So everything's being done over the phone. But typically, there's one time you have to go down to the court or to some other government building to meet with a bankruptcy trustee. Now, the bankruptcy trustee is not your judge. They don't work for the court. They actually are subcontractors from the Department of Justice. And what their job is to review your case, make sure that everything's been completed properly, and they will look to see if there's any assets that can be liquidated for the benefit of your creditors. Well, there's one time when you actually have to go meet with this trustee. The meeting is actually very brief. I always tell people, people get really stressed out over it, and I know it's easy for me to say, but they'll it's a very brief meeting. They do in Arizona, they do like 4 to 5 of these every 30 minutes. And what it is, it's held in a room. It's not held in a courtroom, but it's held in just a conference room. You and your attorney go up to the table, they put you under oath, and they're going to ask you a handful of questions about whether the information that you provided to the court is accurate to the best of your knowledge. They're going to ask you if you've lived in the state like of Arizona for the last couple of years, and ask you if they have any specific questions about your assets. And that's generally it. Sometimes there'll be follow-up questions or they'll want additional documentation, and then you can provide that with your attorney at a later time. Now, that's called the meeting of the creditors. Sometimes you'll hear it called the 341 meeting. 341 is just the code, the bankruptcy code section that governs those meetings. Those are handled a little bit differently in each state. Each trustee is a little bit different. So what I'm telling you there is kind of just a general description of what you can expect if you're going through that process. But the meeting itself is very brief. Like we have to drive a long way to downtown Phoenix, find parking, and then we go in and we're in there 5 minutes and we're out. So it's a long drive for a short meeting. Once that's over, really, the only thing left for you to do in most cases is complete a financial management class. I should have said, before you can file your case, you have to complete a credit counseling course, which is just it takes about an hour. They're done online. It's just an informational course to give you some information on financial matters. This financial management course, which is done after your case is filed, same type of thing. It's done online, takes about an hour, hour and a half, and just gives you some general information on how to handle finances going forward. Shortly after that, then the case will be discharged. Now, the discharge order is important because that's the order from your judge that says you are no longer legally obligated on those debts. And from the day your case is filed until the discharge order is entered, it takes about 4 to 5 months in most Chapter 7 cases. There can be other things out there that complicate Chapter 7 cases, but in general, you're looking at about a 4 to 5 month period where from the day that's filed until the discharge is actually entered and those debts are eliminated. It then generally takes about 2 to 3 reporting cycles with the credit reporting agency for it to show that the debts are all zeroed out on your credit report. I always tell clients, wait about a month, sometimes 2, to pull a credit report and make sure that all those debts have been zeroed out and then they're not, you're not showing as owing anything on those debts any further. So that is kind of big picture thing of Chapter 7 bankruptcy. There are a lot of other issues that can come into it. So just know that sometimes there are things that can complicate it. I can tell you one right out of the chute, couple things I always talk to people about when I meet with them in a consultation is if you have transferred assets out of your name in the last 2 years, it's important that you disclose that to your attorney. That means whether you've sold an asset, whether it's on the internet, or whether you've sold something to somebody, or if you've even given it away, particularly if you've given it to a family member or a friend, if you've signed the title to your car over to your brother or something like that, you need to make sure and disclose that to your bankruptcy attorney because that can cause an issue in a Chapter 7. Same thing goes for monies that are owed to a family member or a friend that you've been actively repaying on for the last year. So for instance, if I borrow $10,000 from my brother and over the last year I've been making monthly payments to try to get that paid back, I need to make sure and disclose that to my bankruptcy attorney because that can also cause issues in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy where the bankruptcy trustee will actually go back to your brother or your family member, whoever, and try to get those funds back. So make sure that you disclose all of those types of transactions. Those are a couple things which I'll go into more detail in a later video on those, but those are some things that may cause issues in a Chapter 7. And before I end this, one big thing is not everybody qualifies for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. You do have to meet a certain income and household size in the means test to be able to file a Chapter 7. So these numbers are updated quarterly and they differ from state to state. I'm going to give you some numbers right now here. I'm recording this in June of 2020. An individual in Arizona, they must make less than $52,319 or about $4,360 per month if they want to qualify for a Chapter 7. And it goes up with the number of people that live in your household. So for instance, the chart I have that I prepare in my consultations, if you have up to 8 people living in your home, you can make $122,950 a year or $10,246 per month and still qualify for a Chapter 7. Little word of caution here, just because if your income may be over the limits that I'm talking about here, one, your state may be different, but two, even if you're in Arizona where I practice and you make more than that, you still may be able to qualify because there are a lot of different deductions we can make to get you below that in the means test so that you still qualify. So if you don't qualify, you're going to end up in a Chapter 13 case or not file bankruptcy. Like I said, I'm going to do another video on Chapter 13 and explain what that process is like, but that's generally what you're looking at for a Chapter 7. It does stay on your credit for 10 years. Most people recover much more quickly than that. Credit cards, car loans, they're available almost immediately for good or for bad, just usually not very good interest rates. Home loans, generally 2 to 4 years. Like FHA will do mortgage loan 2 years after a Chapter 7. Other lenders, you're looking at 3 to 4 years. So I never sugarcoat it. Chapter 7, there's definitely consequences to it, but I can tell you it's a very powerful tool. And in certain situations, it is the best option for eliminating debt. So in my office, I offer a free consultation where we can go over all of your situation specifically for people who live in the state of Arizona and let you know if Chapter 7 would be a good option for you. If you want to learn more about this process, I do have on my channel here, I do have a playlist that deals with bankruptcy specifically and can let you know more about what that process is like and some of these pitfalls that I talked about. I go into some greater depth on there. So again, thanks for watching today. We'll talk to you soon.